The day she told me I wasn't allowed in the kitchen anymore, the soup was already simmering. It was chicken and ginger, my son's favorite since he was little, quietly breathing steam into the air, the kind that fogs your glasses and makes the whole house smell like safety. I was standing at the stove, wooden spoon in my hand, when she leaned against the doorway and cleared her throat the way people do when they want to sound reasonable about something unreasonable. "I think it's best if you stop cooking," she said. Not angry, not loud, just decided. For a moment, I didn't turn around. I watched the bubbles rise and break, one by one, as if the pot itself was thinking about what to say next. My hand kept stirring on instinct, the way it had for decades, even as something small and sharp pressed into my chest. Stop cooking. Like it was a hobby I could put away. Like the kitchen hadn't been the one place in my life where I always knew what I was doing. I turned to look at her. She was holding her phone, thumb hovering over the screen, eyes already sliding away from mine. The room felt suddenly crowded with all the things she didn't say. Hygiene, control, space, boundaries. Words people use when they want you smaller without admitting it. "I'll take over from now on," she added. "It's just better." I nodded. I don't remember deciding to do that. My head just moved, slow and obedient, the way it has learned to do when arguing would only make things worse. I turned off the stove, set the spoon down carefully, and stepped back. The soup kept steaming, as if confused about who it belonged to now. That was the moment I stopped cooking forever. Before that day, our life had a rhythm I understood. Not perfect, no family ever is, but familiar enough that I could move through it without bumping into walls. My son, Daniel, and his wife, Marissa, lived with me in the old house after the wedding. It made sense at the time. Housing prices were high, they were saving for a place of their own, and I had the space. I told myself it would be nice. Company. Laughter. A full table again. At first, it was. Mornings began with the sound of the kettle clicking off and Daniel's footsteps on the stairs, heavy and half asleep. I'd slice fruit while the radio murmured the news, toast browning just enough to smell nutty without burning. Marissa liked her coffee sweet and milky. Daniel took his black. I remembered these things the way mothers do, without effort, without expecting credit. In the evenings, I cooked. Not fancy meals. Just food that knew its place. Rice fluffed with a fork. Lentils simmered until they gave up their bitterness. Chicken roasted until the skin crackled. The kitchen was warm then, alive with small sounds, the chop of a knife, the hiss of oil, the clink of plates stacked to dry. I felt useful there. Grounded. Marissa never said thank you. Not exactly. She'd say, "Oh, you made something," like she'd just noticed the weather. Or, "Daniel, food's ready," calling him, not me. I told myself not to read into it. People show appreciation differently. She was young. She worked long hours. I had been young once too, tired and sharp-edged in ways I didn't recognize until later. Still, there were moments. Little ones. A sigh when I rearranged the fridge to fit leftovers. A frown when I wiped the counter again after she'd already cleaned it. Once, I heard her on the phone in her room, laughing softly. "It's like having a live-in maid," she said. But, you know, with opinions. I stood in the hallway holding a basket of laundry, the words settling into me like dust. She didn't mean for me to hear. That almost made it worse. I folded the laundry anyway. Old habits don't break easily. The first real change came quietly. She started labeling shelves in the pantry. Her things. His things. Spices I used every day were moved higher, out of reach, like they were being politely retired. When I cooked, she hovered, not close enough to help, not far. Enough to ignore. She'd comment on salt. On oil. On how long something had been out. "Are you sure that's still good?" she'd ask, peering into the pot. "I've been making this for 30 years, I'd say, lightly, with a smile meant to soften the truth. She'd smile back, thin and tight. Just saying. I tried to adjust. I cooked less. I cleaned more. I told myself this was temporary, that sharing a home always came with negotiations. But something in the air shifted. The kitchen stopped feeling like mine. It became a space I was allowed to be in, provided I didn't leave fingerprints. The day she banned me, Daniel wasn't home yet. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe she needed privacy to be firm. After she spoke, she picked up the spoon I'd been using and rinsed it under hot water, scrubbing a little too hard, as if erasing something. "I'll handle dinner," she said again, already opening a recipe on her phone. I went in my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The house sounded different from there, duller, like it was holding its breath. My hands smelled like ginger and onion. I rubbed them together, unsure what to do with them now. That evening, I ate whatever she served and said nothing. The soup tasted fine, maybe a little thin. Daniel thanked her, kissed her cheek. He didn't look at me. I watched the way the light fell across the table, the way my place setting seemed slightly out of alignment, and I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't about cooking. It was about control. And I was tired. So I made a decision, as quiet as the one she'd made at the stove. I would step back. Not argue. Not announce. Just withdraw my hands from the places they were no longer welcome. No more meals planned around other people's schedules. No more groceries bought with someone else in mind. No more waiting in the kitchen to be corrected. I would stop cooking. I didn't know then how loud that silence would become. When you stop doing something you've done. Every day for most of your adult life, the absence doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in. It settles into corners. It waits. The first morning after I stopped cooking, I woke before dawn out of habit. My body still believed it had responsibilities. I lay there listening to the house breathe, the low hum of the refrigerator, a pipe knocking somewhere behind the walls, the faint whistle of wind slipping through an old window frame. For a moment, I almost got up, almost reached for my slippers, almost went downstairs to boil water and slice fruit like always. But I didn't. I stayed in bed until the sun pushed a pale line across the ceiling. When I finally went downstairs, the kitchen was already different. A box of cereal sat open on the counter, flakes scattered like someone had eaten in a hurry. The kettle was cold. The sink held a single mug with a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. Marissa wasn't there. Daniel was tying his shoes by the door, phone pressed between shoulder and ear. "I'm running late," he said into the call. Then, to me, "You eating?" "I already did," I said. It wasn't true, but it felt easier than explaining the new shape of my mornings. Days passed. I made tea in my room. Ate toast standing at the counter only when no one else was around. At dinner, I sat at the table and accepted whatever appeared in front of me. Sometimes it was pasta clumped together, sauce still tasting faintly of raw tomato. Sometimes it was takeout, grease soaking through the paper. I said thank you every time. Not because I was grateful, but because I didn't want to be accused of anything else. Marissa seemed pleased. Lighter. The kitchen became louder with her presence, music playing from her phone, cabinet doors opening and closing with confidence. She rearranged shelves again. Bought new utensils. Hung a chalkboard with meal plans written in neat, looping handwriting. Monday, stir-fry. Tuesday, tacos. Wednesday, eat out. My name appeared nowhere. At first, Daniel didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed and chose not to. He came home hungry, ate what was served, scrolled through his phone. Sometimes he'd glance at me and ask, "You okay, Mom?" in that distracted way people ask when they're already halfway out of the conversation. "I'm fine," I said. And I meant it in a narrow sense. I wasn't angry. I wasn't plotting. I felt empty. Like a room after the furniture's been moved out. The real change showed itself slowly in small inconveniences that grew teeth. Marissa forgot to buy groceries. Or bought the wrong things. Almond milk instead of regular. No salt. No onions. She burned the chicken once, black on the outside, pink at the bone. Daniel pushed it around his plate, confused. "Didn't Mom used to?" he started. Marissa cut him off with a laugh. "She's retired from the kitchen, remember?" She said it like a joke. I kept my eyes on my plate. Bills started going unpaid. Not because there wasn't money, but because no one was tracking it. I had always handled that quietly, writing checks at the small desk in the corner, filing receipts in a drawer labeled by year. Marissa assumed things took care of themselves. Daniel assumed someone else was doing it. The first late notice arrived folded inside a utility bill. I saw it when I went to grab the mail. Red ink. A warning. I slid it back into the envelope and placed it on the counter where they'd see it. They didn't. A week later, the internet went out. Marissa stood in the living room staring at her phone, tapping the screen harder each time, like pressure alone might fix it. "Did you pay the bill?" she asked Daniel. "I thought you did." They both looked at me then, as if I might confess to something. I met their eyes calmly. "I don't handle the bills anymore," I said. Not bitter. Just factual. "You didn't ask me to." Marissa flushed. "Well, you could have said something." I nodded. "You didn't ask." That night, dinner was cereal. The house grew tense in ways that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what happens when systems collapse. The trash piled up because no one remembered what day it went out. Laundry overflowed baskets. The fridge held half-used ingredients, nothing complete enough to make a meal. Arguments started, sharp, pointless ones. "You said you'd thaw the meat." "I thought you were cooking." "Why is nothing ever ready?" I sat in the living room with a book I wasn't reading, listening to their voices rise and fall like a storm that didn't need my participation. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel came home from work early, shoulders slumped, tie loosened. He opened the fridge, closed it, opened it again like it might change its mind. "Mom," he said finally, "what's going on?" I looked at him. Really looked. The boy I'd packed lunches for. The man who no longer noticed when the ground under him shifted. "What do you mean?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Nothing works anymore. The house, the food, the bills, it's all just chaos." Marissa appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Are you blaming me?" "I'm not blaming anyone," he said. But his voice wavered. I set my book down. "When someone treats you like a servant," I said softly, "and then takes away the work that made you feel useful, you learn to step back." Marissa scoffed. "This again? You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being honest." The room went quiet. Daniel looked between us, something dawning in his eyes, not anger, not yet. Recognition. "You told her not to cook," he asked Marissa. She shrugged. "I wanted control over my own kitchen." "And you got it," I said. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It was heavy, full of things unsaid. That was the moment they realized my absence had weight. And that weight was only just beginning to press down. The realization didn't arrive like an apology. It arrived like inconvenience. After that Sunday, Daniel tried, awkwardly, to restore order. He made lists, set reminders on his phone, bought groceries with good intentions and no plan. Marissa hovered behind him, correcting, criticizing, taking over when things didn't move fast enough. The kitchen became a battleground of clattering pans and unspoken blame. I stayed out of it. I learned how to make small meals in my room. A kettle. A bowl. Toast with peanut butter eaten slowly, standing by the window. I learned the sound of the house without me in it, the way cabinets slammed, the way the microwave beeped unanswered, the way conversations ended in sighs instead of laughter. The first clue that something deeper was wrong came in the mail again. This time, it wasn't a bill. It was a letter from the bank addressed to all of us. I opened it because it was my house, because I had always opened the mail, because old habits have roots. My hands trembled just enough to notice as I read the words twice to be sure they were real. Overdraft notice. Late fees. Account flagged for review. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter flat beneath my palms, feeling the grain of the wood through the paper. The table had been sanded smooth years ago by my husband, God rest him, who believed a table should last longer than arguments. I remembered him standing there, measuring, patient. I remembered how we paid our bills on time even when money was tight because dignity mattered to him. When Marissa came in, she froze. "What's that?" she asked, already defensive. "A problem," I said. "One you didn't tell me about." She snatched the letter, skimmed it, rolled her eyes. "It's nothing. The app glitched. I'll fix it." Daniel came in a moment later, drawn by tone rather than words. He read the letter slowly. His jaw tightened. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked her. "I didn't think it was a big deal," she said. "You're acting like the world is ending." I stood up. This house doesn't survive on not a big deal. It survives on attention. Marissa laughed once, sharp. "So now you're lecturing?" "No," I said. "I'm explaining." She looked at me like I was speaking another language. Maybe I was. Responsibility can sound foreign to people who haven't had to carry it. The discovery unfolded over the next 2 weeks, piece by piece, like a seam coming apart. There were credit card statements I'd never seen before. Charges that didn't match groceries or gas. Subscriptions. Delivery fees. Clothes returned too late for refunds. When I asked calmly, Marissa waved it away. I needed things, she said. And I work. It's my money too. Daniel said nothing. His silence was a small betrayal of its own. Then came the phone call. I was in the living room, folding a blanket, when the house phone rang. It hadn't rung in years. I picked it up without thinking. They asked for Daniel. I listened. I sat down. When I hung up, my legs felt hollow. Who was it? Daniel asked, coming in from the kitchen. A collections agent, I said. For your name. Marissa's face drained of color. Daniel stared at her. What did you do? I didn't do anything, she said quickly. Too quickly. They're overreacting. The truth cracked open then, not with drama, but with exhaustion. She had been using a card opened in his name. Just to help, she said. Just to smooth things out. The balance had grown quietly, interest stacking like dust. When money ran short, she moved it around. Hid notices. Promised herself she'd fix it next month. Next month never came. Daniel sank into a chair. He looked smaller there, elbows on knees, hands clasped. Why didn't you tell me? Marissa's voice wobbled. Because you would have freaked out. I am freaking out, he said softly. I watched them from across the room, not intervening, not rescuing. This wasn't my moment to absorb impact. I had done that for years. This was theirs. You made me feel useless, I said quietly, not to accuse, but to anchor the moment. So I stepped aside. And now you're seeing what I used to hold together. Marissa's eyes flashed. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. No. I'm mourning it. The confrontation didn't end with yelling. It ended with distance. Daniel slept on the couch for a week. Marissa stayed out late, coming home with the smell of cold air and stress clinging to her coat. The house felt bruised. Then the public consequence began to ripple outward. Daniel's supervisor called him into the office about his focus. Missed deadlines. Distraction. Stress has a way of leaking into places you can't hide it. At church, people asked why we hadn't hosted dinner in so long. You always do, they said. We miss it. I smiled. Things change. Marissa's mother called, concerned. She sounds overwhelmed, she said to me, as if I were still the one managing emotions. I told her the truth carefully. That households are ecosystems. That when you pull out one root, the soil shifts. The final discovery came one evening when I found my old recipe box in the trash. Cards stained with oil and thyme. Notes in my handwriting. Add more cumin if Daniel's had a long day. Don't forget low heat. Marissa stood behind me. I was decluttering. I picked up the box. Those were mine. She crossed her arms. You weren't using them. That's when I understood the deepest betrayal wasn't money or control. It was erasure. The quiet belief that my presence was optional until it was inconvenient to remove. I took the box back to my room. That night, Daniel knocked on my door. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there, voice small. I didn't see it, he said. I should have. I looked at him, the man he'd become, the boy he still was. Seeing late is still seeing, I said. The house was already collapsing. Emotionally, financially, structurally. I had stepped back. Now they would have to decide whether to rebuild or keep blaming the missing beams. The hardest part about stepping back is resisting the instinct to step in again when everything starts to wobble. For years, I had been the quiet brace behind the walls, the one who noticed leaks before they stained the ceiling, who heard tension in voices before it turned into shouting. Walking away from that role didn't come naturally. It felt like leaving a stove unattended, like watching a child wobble on a bike and forcing your hands to stay at your sides. But I stayed still. After the night Daniel apologized at my door, something shifted, not repaired, but exposed. He started asking questions. Real ones. About bills. About groceries. About what I used to do in a week that now felt like an impossible mountain to him. How did you keep track of all of it? he asked one evening, standing in the hallway with a notebook in his hand like a student who had missed too many classes. I paid attention, I said. Marissa watched from the kitchen, eyes sharp. So, what? Now you're the expert again? I was always the expert, I said gently. You just didn't like that. That was when the reaction truly began. Not revenge, not schemes, but a refusal to be invisible. I didn't cook. I didn't clean shared spaces. I didn't manage schedules or soften conversations. I focused on myself in small, deliberate ways. I took morning walks, even when the weather pressed cold into my joints. I joined a book club at the library, women my age, all of us carrying histories we were finally setting down. I laughed more there than I had in months. At home, the silence thickened. Daniel tried to fix things with effort instead of understanding. He cooked elaborate meals from online recipes, ingredients scattered across the counter like evidence of ambition. Half the time, he forgot something crucial: salt, time, patience. He burned a roast once, smoke curling up to the ceiling. Marissa slammed a window open, muttering. This wouldn't have happened if, she started. If what? He snapped. If you hadn't pushed her out? She stared at him. You're choosing her over me. No, he said. I'm choosing reality. That argument echoed through the house, bounced off walls that had heard too many like it. I sat in my room, listening without listening, learning how to let grown people wrestle with the consequences of their choices. The financial reckoning arrived next. Daniel asked me to sit down with him one afternoon. Papers were spread across the table, statements, notices, scribbled notes. His eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, but from the strain of finally seeing numbers instead of ignoring them. I need help, he said. I looked at Marissa. She didn't look back. I can explain, I said to Daniel, but I won't fix it for you. He nodded. That's fair. We went through everything slowly. I showed him how interest compounds, how late fees multiply quietly, how ignoring a problem doesn't make it smaller, it makes it hungrier. He listened like someone learning a language they should have known already. Marissa interrupted often. Defensive. Tired. You're making me sound irresponsible, she said. I folded my hands. I'm describing actions, not character. She laughed bitterly. Same thing. No, I said. Character is what you do once you understand the damage. That landed harder than I expected. She went quiet after that. The real action, the one that would change everything, came for me a week later. I called a lawyer. Not to evict. Not to threaten. But to understand my options. This was my house. My name on the deed. My responsibility, whether I wanted it or not. I needed clarity before kindness could return. When I told Daniel, his face fell. Are you kicking us out? I'm protecting myself, I said. Those are not the same thing. Marissa exploded. So this is your revenge, she said, voice shaking. You let everything fall apart just so you could feel powerful. I met her eyes. No, I let everything fall apart because it was never mine to hold alone. The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd had since she married my son. She admitted, through tears and anger and long pauses, that she had felt threatened by me from the beginning. By my history in the house. By the way Daniel trusted me. By the ease with which I moved through spaces she wanted to claim as hers. I needed control, she said, because I felt like a guest. I nodded, and I became a servant. Silence filled the room, heavy but necessary. Daniel made a decision then. Not a dramatic one. A quiet, adult one. We need to move out, he said. Not because Mom is forcing us, but because this isn't working. Marissa looked stunned. You're serious? Yes, he said. We can't grow here. And we can't keep hurting her. That night, the house felt different. Not healed, but honest. They began packing the following week. Boxes stacked in the hallway, labeled in Marissa's careful handwriting. I stayed out of the way, offering help once and only once. Do you want me to make you something to eat while you pack? I asked. Marissa hesitated, looked at the kitchen, looked at me. Yes, she said quietly. If you don't mind. I cooked a simple meal. Rice. Lentils. Nothing fancy. The smell filled the house again, familiar and grounding. When I set the plates down, Marissa whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't an apology. But it was a beginning. As they carried boxes to the car, I stood in the doorway and watched. Not with bitterness, with relief. The action I took wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was firm. And it changed everything. The house was quiet after they left in a way it hadn't been in years. Not the lonely kind of quiet, the kind that rings in your ears, but a settled quiet, like dust finally laying flat after being kicked up for too long. Their bedroom door stood open, the room hollowed out to walls and light. No chargers. Trailing across the floor. No piles of clothes waiting for someone else to fold them. Just space. I stood there for a long time, hand on the doorframe, breathing in the absence. That was when the emotional collapse reached its final stage, not with shouting or tears, but with realization. Daniel came back alone 2 days later. He didn't knock. He never has. He just stepped inside and stood awkwardly near the kitchen, hands in his pockets like a boy waiting to be scolded. His eyes moved around the room, landing on things he hadn't noticed before, the spice rack, the clean counters, the way the afternoon light slanted across the table. "It feels different," he said. "It is," I replied. He sat down slowly, elbows on the table. "We're struggling already." I didn't pretend to be surprised. "She thought it would be easier," he continued. "Her place is small. The rent's higher than we expected. The credit card companies are calling again." I poured us tea. Set his cup down gently, the way I used to when he was sick. "Struggle isn't punishment," I said. "It's information." He nodded, eyes wet. "I didn't protect you." That sentence landed deeper than any apology he could have offered. "I didn't ask you to protect me," I said. "I asked you to see me." He looked up then, really looked, and something in his face softened. "I do now." Marissa didn't come back with him. She called instead, late one evening when the house was wrapped in dusk. Her voice sounded smaller, without the walls between us. "I didn't know how much you did," she said. "I thought things just happened." "They don't," I said gently. "They're carried." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm embarrassed." "That's not a bad place to start," I told her. The financial collapse followed quickly after that. Daniel lost his job, not fired, but let go quietly when restructuring came. Stress had made him unfocused. Late. Distracted. When he told me, his shoulders sagged like he'd been holding them up with will alone. "I failed," he said. "No," I corrected. "You learned late." He slept in his old room for a while after that. Not permanently. Just enough to study himself. I made him breakfast once, only once, because care should be intentional, not assumed. Marissa spiraled differently. She took on extra hours. Missed payments anyway. Pride made her avoid asking for help until the consequences grew too loud to ignore. One afternoon, she showed up at the house unexpectedly, eyes swollen, mascara smudged. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to share space with someone who already belonged." I let her cry at my kitchen table. Not because she deserved absolution, but because holding anger had never served me well. "I'm not your enemy," I told her. "But I won't be your foundation." She nodded through tears. "I understand." That was the last time she asked me for anything. The public consequences came quietly but thoroughly. Family members stopped assuming I would host holidays. Church friends learned I was no longer the one who handles everything. Daniel's pride took a hit. Marissa's image cracked. They were no longer the polished young couple. They were learners, exposed. And me? I healed. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But in steady increments. I cooked again, not for obligation, not for approval, but for myself. I took my time. Played music. Let things simmer. I invited friends over when I wanted company. Said no when I didn't. The kitchen became mine again, not as territory, but as choice. One evening, months later, Daniel and Marissa came together. They looked different. Thinner. Quieter. Older in the eyes. "We're in counseling," Daniel said. Marissa nodded. "And budgeting classes." I smiled. "Good." They didn't stay long. They didn't eat. They didn't ask me to fix anything. When they left, I stood at the sink washing a single plate and realized something important. The collapse wasn't the end. It was the correction. People think quiet withdrawal is weakness. They confuse silence with surrender. But sometimes, stepping back is the strongest thing you can do because it forces everyone else to step forward. I didn't win. I reclaimed. And that made all the difference. I still cook now. Not every day. Not on a schedule. Not because someone expects a plate to appear at a certain hour. I cook when I want to. When the day feels long. When the air feels heavy. When I miss the version of myself that found peace in small, ordinary rituals. Some evenings, I make soup just for me. I let it simmer slowly, listening to the quiet of a house that finally feels balanced again. I eat at the table alone, not with loneliness, but with dignity. There's a difference. One drains you. The other restores you. Looking back, I realized something important. I didn't stop cooking to punish anyone. I stopped because I had been reduced to a role instead of respected as a person. And when people only value what you do, but not who you are, stepping away becomes an act of self-respect. The collapse that followed wasn't my revenge. It was the truth surfacing. Homes don't fall apart because one person leaves the kitchen. They fall apart when appreciation is replaced with entitlement. When control replaces gratitude. When love forgets humility. Daniel learned that. Marissa learned that. And I learned that my worth was never tied to how useful I made myself. If you're listening to this and feeling unseen in your own home, if your kindness has slowly turned into expectation, I want you to know this. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to rest your hands. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. So tell me, if someone took your place for granted, would you quietly step away, or would you keep giving until there was nothing left? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, please consider subscribing. You never know who might need to hear this next.